What's up, Wizards? It's Mooner. I'm back. I got a deck tech for you guys. I'm going to try to make this one quick. So skirmish season has just finished up. So there aren't too many Blitz events on the horizon. But it was a doozy of a skirmish season. We saw 4 heroes LL. We saw Kano, Kasai, Chain, and Ira all hit Living Legend this season. So my skirmishes ended up being towards the end of the season, so I wasn't able to play Kano at any of them. But I did take Emperor to the last 2 skirmishes that I was able to attend. And I did really well. I went undefeated in Swiss for one of them and made it to the finals, only to lose to a Dash. It was a really close matchup. And then I went... I only lost 1 game in the second matchup, and that was to a Reinhardt in the finals. So this deck performs extremely well. It does have its little bit of weaknesses. It is susceptible to being high-rolled by Reinhardt, but other than that, this deck is an absolute powerhouse, and I wanted to share it with you. So before, if you guys recall, I did a Extra Royal deck tech where he was wearing the Crown of Dominion. That was kind of just a little bit of a meme and something I wanted to try out, and I've retracted a bit on that, and I wanted to go over that. So we have Emperor, Drakaev Ace here. If you don't know what he does and you're completely new to Emperor, Emperor is a Royal Draconic Warrior Wizard hero, young. He has 4 intellect and 15 health, and he is currently the only wizard left in Blitz. But he's still an insanely powerful hero. His text box reads, you may only have red cards in your deck. Action, pay 3 resources, search your deck for a command and conquer, attack with it, then shuffle. So he has a pretty awesome hero ability, but he does have the limitations of only being able to have red cards in the deck. So that is what we have, only red cards in the deck. I'm running 6 pieces of equipment currently, and the rest is the deck in the sideboard. My main piece of my main headpiece is Arcanite Skullcap. Because we started such a low life, we really need that added a barrier of equipment and life that Arcanite Skullcap is almost always turned on, especially at the beginning of the game, and it just blocks for 3. We're not really worried about the Arcane Barrier part of it. This is just essentially there to block for 3. Block for 2 once, and then block for 1 once. Then on our arms, we're wearing Braveforge Bracers because we're a warrior. We have access to this. Again, this is only there for the block. It blocks 2, and then it blocks 1. So this is essentially, between these 2 pieces, it's giving you an extra 6 health. Our second piece of arm is Metacarpus Node. This comes in for the Runeblade matchups, mostly Vincent and Briar, where you might need Arcane Barrier 1 and you want to have a little bit of extra reach on your kill zone. Then we have Flamescale Furnace. The deck would not run or function without this card. Being an all-red deck, being able to gain resources from the red cards in your pitch zone is incredibly vital. It also blocks for 2, and then if you absolutely have to block for it, it blocks for an additional 1. But it does have temper, so it will blow up if you block for it. But generally, you're only using it once to block, hopefully. Then we are running Stormstriders. This is the only boots we're running. We are a wizard, so we have access to this insanely overpowered piece of equipment here, which instant pay 1 resource to destroy Stormstriders. You may play your next wizard non-attack action card this turn as though it were an instant. So this is one of our win conditions here, is being able to play on our opponent's turn and play like something like an Emeritus Scalding, red out of the arsenal, and then follow it up with our weapon of choice, which is Waning Moon. So these are the only equipment pieces we are running. The only choice you ever have to make is between Braveforge Racers and Metacarpus Nodes. And like I said, this comes in for the Runeblade matchups when you need our AB1. And this generally comes into every other matchup. So this is the only equipment pieces that I'm running in this deck. There is no Waning, Illuminating Constellus or anything like that. So let's get into the deck. So I've broken it up into attacks, which there are, I believe, 18 of, and spells. And then we have the rest of the deck right here. So first, let's go over all the attacks. Every single attack in this deck, except for Command and Conquer, has Go Again. And that is very, very important because we are an aggro deck. We want to go as long, we want to have as wide of chains as possible attack. So let's start off with Scar for a Scar. It's always turned on because we are at a lower life total. So this is just a 0-4 with Go Again. Same with Blaze Headlong. As long as you can play a red card before it's a 0-4 with Go Again. Then to round out the 0-4 with Go Agains, we have Ravenous Rabble. Because it checks the top of your deck, and the top of your deck is always red, this is always an unconditional 0-4 with Go Again. So one of the strongest cards in the deck. Then we have 2 copies of Flamecall Awakening. This is really great for being able to fish out a Phoenix Flame and do some really crazy nutty trickery with like your Flame Scale Furnace and getting massive amounts of resources. But if you've played another red card before Flamecall Awakening, you can tutor out a Phoenix Flame and add it to your hand. You can either attack with that Phoenix Flame for 1, or you can pitch it to gain resources and continue your train. Then we have Life for Life, one of my favorite cards in the deck. This is a 1-4 with Go Again. It has conditional Go Again. If you are at a lower life total than your opponent, which generally we are, it has Go Again. And if it hits, if it hits and connects, you gain 1 life. So it's technically can be considered a 1-5. This is a card that your opponent doesn't want to let hit. Then we have 2 copies of Give and Take. This is really good into those long grinding matchups. And this says this is either 3 free damage with Go Again because it incentivizes your opponent not to block it. Because if they do block it, you get to take any card from your graveyard, any action card, I should say, any action card from your graveyard and put it on the top of your deck. So that lets you put like a really powerful spell back on top of your deck, a really powerful attack on top of your deck, or a tome, which we'll get into in a minute, back on top of your deck. It's really, really powerful. And then we have 2 copies of Enlightened Strike. All 3 modes on this are incredibly powerful. This can be just a 1 card for 7. It can be a 1 card for 5 with Go Again. Or it can be a 1 card for 5 with draw a card to get an arsenal. And since every card in this deck has utility, you're not really losing out on... There's nothing in this deck that you wouldn't want to arsenal. So drawing a card is probably your highest value to get that extra arsenal card, but still just a 1 card for 7 is a powerhouse, or being able to get Go Again is just incredibly strong. So that's why we keep Enlightened Strike in the deck. Then lastly, we have 2 copies of Command and Conquer. This just lets us play off of our hero ability, and it acts as poppers in the prison matchups. And then we have the last attack in the deck is 1 copy of Censor. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite cards to end a chain with. Censor is, especially if you know your opponent's deck, you can call out something like Oasis Respite or Pummel or Crippling Crush or something like that, and just hedge a little bit on what your opponent has. If you can get that soul read on what your opponent has in their hand. If they're holding back their entire hand because they're not wanting to block, and you're against like a Guardian or something like that, you can just name Pummel. Or if you're up against, my favorite way to use this was when I was playing against Brutes, to hit them with a Censor, and if they didn't want to block it, name Bloodrush Bellows or something like that. Bloodrush Bellows was one of the ones that I always would name, and sure enough, they always had the Bloodrush Bellows. Or if you're at a really low life total, name something like Reckless Swing or something like that. Censor, having the 1 copy of it in there to end the combat chain with, is really, really powerful. And it makes your it asks a question like, do you want to block this card and give up 2 cards, or do you want to take 5 damage and have me name one of the most powerful cards that I predict could be in your hand? So that's why I keep 1 copy of Censor in the deck. Censor and Command and Conquer are the only 2 attacks in this deck that don't have natural Go Again and can't gain Go Again. Now let's go over the spells. I am currently running quite a number of spells because I like to really lean into the wizard aspect of this deck. The great thing about Emperor is it provides your opponent with a puzzle they have to solve even before you start the game. And that is, what kind of armor do I bring in? How much AB and how much armor do I bring in? If I bring in more Arcane Barrier, you just get slaughtered by attacks. If you bring in less Arcane Barrier, you just get slaughtered by Arcane. So I have 3 0 for 3 attacks, and that's 1 Aether Dart. This is able to target any target, to deal damage to any target. So this is good into Dromai if you happen to have face a Dromai or something like that and need to kill off a Thamai. Then I have 2 copies of Prognosticate. There's no way to buff this up, so Surge is not active, so it's just a 0 for 3. Then we have 2 copies of Emeritus Scalding. This is one of your win conditions. Getting Emeritus Scalding into Arsenal, and then playing it off of your boots, and then following it up with Waning Moon after activating your Flamescale Furnace and getting a shitload of resources. This is going to come in for 6, and then you're going to follow up with Waning Moon for 9. Then I have 2 copies of Reverberate. This is also another combo trick that you can do in another win condition. You can put a Reverberate in the arsenal and then break your boots and play a Reverberate. And if it hits and does any damage, you can follow it up with anything like an Aether Quickening or a Scalding Rain. These are just the 1 for 4s I have that you can play. You can still like get some arcane damage in off of like a 1 or 2 card hand and still be able to push for arcane damage. So I have 2 copies of Scalding Rain and 2 copies of Aether Quickening in there. Then we have the big boy. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have 2 other 0 for 3s. I do have 2 copies of Sap in there. They were just at the back there. So I have 5 0 for 3s, which is the Saps, the Prognosticates, and the 1 copy of Aether Dart. Really good to just end the chain on if you're like Blaze Headlong, Scar for a Scar, Ravenous Rabble, and then into an Aether Dart or something like that. And then we have the 1 for 4s, which is the Aether Quickenings and the Scalding Rains. Then we have the 1 for 3s, which is the Reverberate, which helps you just like chain a couple spells together. And it is a win condition. This can get you up to 10 damage, like a Reverberate from Arsenal plus a Aether Quickening from hand, followed up by a Waning Moon, is 10 damage, which is pretty good. And if you were running Metacarpus Node, you can buff one of those spells, so you can get it actually get it up to 11 damage. Like I said, then we have the Emeritus Scalding, which is our main win condition. Then we have our other big boys, which is Swell Tidings and Voltic Bolts. These are just 2 for 5s, very powerful spells. With the addition of Tome, it's much easier and much more efficient to be able to play your Voltic Bolts or your Swell Tidings, because you are getting a lot of free resources off of that. And then that brings us to Tome of Imperial Flame. This card is absolutely busted, and one of the things that makes Emperor so viably competitive right now. This card just says, draw a card if you're a royal, instead draw 2 cards, and then you may pitch 2 cards to your pitch zone. If you don't, banish your hand. You're always going to pitch 2 cards. You're going to get those resources. You're going to activate your Flamescale Furnace, and you're going to get 3 resources. You're going to have a 4-card hand, and then you're just going to absolutely go nuts. You're going to throw a bunch of go again attacks, and then you're going to follow it up and finish it up with like a Swell Tidings, a Voltic Bolt, or an Aether Quickening or something like that. So you're just going to present your opponent with both physical and arcane damage all in the same turn. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly difficult for them to block efficiently, and it puts them in a bad position really, really quickly. It's a really good way to get your opponent to that 9 or 10 life threshold. So Tome of Imperial Flame is absolutely busted. It's even more busted if you play it out of Arsenal. And then you have a then you just have a 5-card hand. It's just absolutely nuts with 3 resources in your pitch zone. Then we have 2 copies of Sink Below in the main board. This is just a 0 for 4, being able to cover up some breakpoints, and then maybe filter your hand, get rid of like a spell or draw into a spell or something like that. Sink Below is just really good. I prefer it over Fate Foreseen. And then left over in the main board, we have 2 copies of Nimblism. This pairs, this actually lines up with every single attack in the deck other than Command and Conquer. So you can buff up any other attack in the deck other than Command and Conquer. It's a really good way to give Blaze Headlong go again, playing a Nimblism into a Blaze Headlong, or a Nimblism into Censor. It's a really good way to get that damage through. The only thing that it doesn't line up with is Command and Conquer, but that's okay because we're usually tutoring Command and Conquer off of our hero ability. So that rounds out the main deck, and then we have the sideboard. I've got 1 copy of Sigil of Solace in the sideboard. This mostly comes in just for the Brute matchups. This is something that you want to hedge against for like Reckless Swing or like Stick into Arsenal, and make sure the Brutes, Rhinar especially, doesn't unalive you on your turn by stripping your whole hand and playing like a Blood Rush Bells or something like that. This is just a little bit of extra life after you throw out all your armor. Just being able to hopefully stay alive long enough to so that they, have their power turn, and then you can finish out the game. So I have 1 copy of Sigil of Solace in the sideboard. Then I have 2 Blessings of Aether in the sideboard. This is in the deck for those super long grinding matchups where they're going to try to fatigue you out. And I'm thinking of specifically like Bravo or Yoji. Playing Blessing of Aether and being able to come in with a Swell Tidings for 8 or an Aether Quickening for 7 is really powerful, and then following it up with Waning Moon or something like that. Just being able to push over their defenses and their high Arcane Barrier. This is a card that most of those matchups like Yoji and Bravant and Bravo, they're going to try to fatigue you out. So you're going to want to pitch these early and then play them late game with your spells when you get them into like a nice comfortable kill range. And then I have, lastly, to finish out the sideboard, I have 2 copies of Fendel's Fighting Spirit. This is for the Prism matchup specifically, being able to pop an Angel and then gain a life while doing so. You can play it off of like a Tome, being able to get those resources and then just like attack with a Fendel's Fighting Spirit, but it's mostly in here just as a popper for the Prism matchup. Alright guys, that's the deck. I think it's incredibly powerful, incredibly fun to play. Emperor is the last wizard standing in Blitz. The deck link will be in the description of this video. If you like this, please give me a like, a comment, subscribe. Help me help the algorithm, help you guys out. I'm just trying to bring all the wizard content that I can to all my wizard people out there and promote wizard to anyone who will listen. All right, guys. Peace out, wizards. It's Mooner. Have a nice day. Later.